Hello, DECA members. My name is Sarah Sunny, and I'm your Texas DECA District 7 president. And today we have another special guest. I'm going to let her introduce herself so you can just name your grade, obviously your name, what association you're from, officer position, all those good things.
Hi guys, I am Shelby Wooten and I am the Tennessee DECA state president. I was a member of DECA at Heritage High School last year, and I am now a freshman at the University of Knoxville in Tennessee, and I'm so excited to be here.
So just get started with kind of your DECA journey, basically how you started freshman year. I guess some people actually started in middle school, but wherever you started and kind of how it's been on this roller coaster of a journey that we call DECA.
Yes, so as a middle schooler in the eighth grade at my middle school, we would have the high schoolers. They would come over and kind of tell about the career and technical education programs that they offered. And they had the business teacher come over and speak. And my mom was actually in DECA in high school, and she had already told me about the great experiences that she had and the trips that she got to go on. So I knew that was something that I wanted to try going in to high school. So my freshman year, I joined an intro to business and marketing class. And I immediately fell in love and knew that's what I wanted to do. So my teacher was also the advisor. And so she mentioned DECA to me, and I went to a meeting and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I joined DECA my freshman year. I competed at our district competition and went to the state competition in Chattanooga. And I knew that I was hooked. I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I went to ICDC that year and compete, or was in a learning academy. So we got to see that in Orlando my freshman year. And then from there, just kind of flourished. So my sophomore year was the COVID year, but I still did several different community events and things with DECA. And then my junior year is when I decided to run for state office. So I served as the state secretary for Tennessee last year, and then I reran, and I am now president.
Well, congratulations on your presidency and also everything that you've accomplished in DECA so far. So
Thank
that's
you.
interesting. You're in college, but you're a state officer.
Yes. So for Tennessee, you can be a state officer your freshman year. So last year, our West Tennessee vice president was Emma Rose, and she was also a freshman. So
Hmm.
you can do freshman year of college.
Okay, so just freshman year, kind of learning what it, so how has that been for you, kind of managing the introduction into college and then still balancing aspects of your high school career, but moving that into a different aspect of what you want to go into?
It's definitely been a learning process, that's for sure. Just learning how to balance school and DECA because college is so different. You have to have your own time schedule and you have to learn time management. So just kind of having that plan of, okay, this is how much I'm going to spend doing my DECA stuff, but make sure I get school stuff done first. I still visit my high school and go to their meetings when I can, just so I can kind of stay in the loop with what they're doing and what other high schools are doing. I've been doing some chapter visits to local schools. So I'm still in that high school realm. I'm seeing what they're doing too. So I'm not too far. But it's definitely been an adjustment. It's trying to balance everything, but not too bad.
Well, that's really sweet that you still have the opportunity with what I'm assuming is a pretty hectic schedule right now to still go and see your chapter. That's so sweet. Recently, we had our FLC for District 7 last week.
Mhm.
And on our way back to our home campus, we started FaceTiming our senior officers from the previous year. And it's really sweet to kind of see them in a different light when out there in college and they seem so much more mature than they were just a few more months ago, but they still have so many fond memories. And I love that you have the opportunity to give them advice first-handedly and kind of share what you've been through in DECA.
Right. And it totally helps. I'm still very close to the team last year. And so with Emma being serving in college, she helped me a lot just learning how to balance and stuff. I watched her do it, so it made it easier for me to learn that process as well.
Absolutely. And with that, every kind of DECA story and journey has their highs and some of what I would call their struggles. Not necessarily bad times, but things that you have to overcome as a DECA member. But also, we'll talk about the highs, of course, and the best parts of the organization. So go ahead and share some of those.
Yeah, so when I get asked this question, I always think of this one memory. So last year we went to Power Trip. So I was serving as the secretary, and we decided that we were going to host a workshop. And that was the first time that I had really ever spoken to lots of people in person, because when we get elected at our state conference, we go on stage and wave, but we don't speak then. So I hadn't really talked to anyone in a big aspect. So we planned our workshop for Power Trip. And the night before, we were practicing in a hotel room with the five of us girls. And it was really hard for me because I was the type of person that felt like I needed to have everything I was going to say written down, and I was just going to look at it. And I remember my team being like, "No, Shelby, you have to memorize it. Once you memorize what you're going to talk about, then you can just speak freely." And I just could not get over that. I was like, "No, I need to have notes. I need to have written down what I'm going to say." And I was so nervous going into that because I was like, "How am I just going to speak to people?" So we get into this workshop, and I'm not joking. There was like 200 seats, and every seat was filled, and there was people standing all around the edges of the room and sitting in the floor. And I was like, there is no way I'm going to do this. I was so nervous. But our team was so good. We kind of backed each other up, and I got up there and I didn't look at my notes at all. I just spoke what I had memorized because I didn't have time to look at my notes. It was so real. I just had to speak what I know. And after that, I was like, oh, I can do this. So it was a kind of a struggle at first, but it showed me that it wasn't near as bad as I was expecting, and that I ended up loving it. And then I was like, okay, I can do this. So it kind of prepped me for the rest of the year.
So that's a good point. I get asked that question a lot, particularly in how do you prepare to do a big speech or a big presentation when especially you're going to be talking in front of so many people. I think our past FLC, it was interesting because I was surrounded around people that also knew how to present. They're all chapter officers or state officers or somebody who's been serving in that leadership capacity. So they already kind of have that idea. So I kind of felt like I needed to bring my game up a little bit, make sure that I was really sharing with them the best that I could possibly do. And it took me a while to kind of realize that I do not work well with scripts. They stress me out, and I tend to overthink what I'm going to say then. So and I've learned this the hard way because I would do it. I was just like you, where I had to know exactly what I had to say. But I kind of, even with my presentation for competition, I've changed my mindset to these are the things that I have to discuss, and I'm going to discuss them based on what I know. So if I know the content of what I have to talk about, then it's not going to be hard for me to present said concepts. I don't need a word for word demonstration of what I'm going to say because I already know what I'm talking about. And it
Right.
took me so long to realize that was the problem, why it wasn't clicking. There was like a disconnect. And this was before I ran for district office and I pulled it together a little bit. But before then, I had to train myself. And coming from a public speaking background, I'm a debater, so that's something that I've done. But in debate, you read from a script a lot of the time and you don't from for a lot of the time as well. And so it was very different because sometimes I was very reliant on having the words in front of me, and other times I didn't have the ability to do that. I had to just talk. But I realized that when I know the material, it's not hard for me to do it. So now I have like 5 points that I have to hit in my head before every single presentation, and I'll like check it off as I go. I'm like, okay, I hit that, but I know what I'm saying. And so that's a great tip for anybody who is just getting into DECA, who has been in DECA for a while, or whatever your point may be in this organization. There's always something that, I mean, now, to be fair, scripts might work for you. It might be your golden ticket to making sure your presentations work. But for a lot of people, I will say that they get so consumed with what they have to say that they actually forget what they're talking about because they're trying to think, well, I had this written. What was the next sentence that I had to say? But you know what to say because you know the material. You don't need the words in front of you. So speak about you because you're the person presenting. They want to hear your thoughts. And
Mhm.
I don't know, it was something that I had to overcome too. So that'd probably be one of my biggest struggles that I didn't think about until you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's definitely an adjustment. After that time, I was like, oh, okay, I don't need it written down word for word. I can just speak on what I know. And ever since then, it's been so much easier for me, even in Zoom calls and things.
Right.
We host a Tennessee Togethers call once a month for just the Tennessee members. And I was like, I don't need to have written down what I'm going to say. I can just speak on what my topic is. And it's been so much easier since then.
Mhm. Let's talk about a Deca High. What was kind of when you felt you were on top of the world in Deca? And that can be as simple as you gaining president. That's a great thing. And it's obviously probably very emotional, very proud moment. or even something small that you wouldn't realize would make such a big impact on your career?
Yeah, so I got elected as a secretary in March of 2021. And so then we went to ELS that summer with my old team. And I remember we had never met in person before. We had met on Zooms and FaceTime and things, but we had not met in person because we ran virtually that year. So we get to Washington, D.C. for ELS, and one of the girls flew with me because we live closer together, and then the rest flew out of Nashville because they were on the other side of the state. So we met in Washington, and we get into this rental car with these girls that I've never met before. And we get to her hotel and we get out. And of course, that's where all the DECA members are and all the other state officers. And we get out and everybody knew us. They were like, hey, that's Tennessee DECA. And I was like, how do they know us? We have not talked to any of these people before. And I remember I texted my mom and I was like, I love this. Like that was our first event that like we had been out. That's the first time we wore our uniforms, all that kind of stuff. And it was just such a community. I mean, before we could even get our luggage to the room, there was people stopping us in the elevator to ask our names and our Snapchats and our Instagrams. And I just knew that this was going to be something that I loved and wanted to do again because it's such a big family. I mean, that's where I met a ton of people that I talk to all the time now. So I think that was definitely one of my biggest ties.
That is such an amazing experience when you first get to that. I would say the larger conferences for sure. So things like ELS, Power Trip, ICDC, especially state conferences if you're hosting them. Those are kind of when you realize the grand, I mean, really just how big it really is. Because when you're in your chapters, you're very secluded and you don't always realize how many other people there are. And I think it didn't take until ICDC really when I realized that, wow, and this is only a portion of the kids that have competed the entire year. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting to see, but it's also the best experience to know that you're inevitably going to find a new friend at every single conference that you go to, and you're going to meet somebody new and you're going to gain so many more connections. So that's a really special experience. And I love that I'm continuously able to, it's not like a one-off thing where I
Right.
did this, it's great, I'm on a high now and I'll move on and do something later, but this is something that I'm continuously building on. And everyone in DECA is always building connections. So that is definitely my favorite thing about DECA.
Yeah, I agree. Lots of people, when I go and visit schools, they'll say, well, what's your favorite part? Like, what's the main takeaway? And I always say, like, I would not have been to these places or met these people if it wasn't for DECA. I probably wouldn't have talked to people from California and from across the country if it wasn't for DECA. And now I've met tons of people from
Mhm.
across the US because of DECA. And it's just so surreal and awesome.
Yeah, for sure. So talk a little bit about now you have a lot of insight on this because you've served 2 terms as an association officer. But what is it really like being a Tennessee DECA state officer, state president, secretary, everything that you've gone through? And we've talked about this a little bit, but I guess you can, since we talked about the college aspect, talk about basically how it was managing those things in high school.
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that I never realized. I mean, as a freshman and sophomore, just as a chapter member, I didn't even know if I knew who the state officers were.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, of course you do when you go to state and things, but before that, I didn't know. And then I totally didn't know what all they had going on. But last year, our team would meet once a week. We met pretty much every Saturday for the most part. And just, I mean, that's how we got so close. We Zoomed, and it wasn't always like formal, like getting things done. I mean, we talked and kept up and talked about our personal life too, but that's where we planned so many things.
Mhm.
So we all kind of knew that on Saturdays, either in the morning or at night late, that was kind of our time. So we would spend an hour and a half just getting things done. Hadley was our president at the time, and so she would give us a list of things that we needed to get done. And I had learned so much from her last year serving as the president because she did such an awesome job. That's really helped prepare me for this year because I watched her do it. Um, so we started many new things last year that Tennessee DECA had never done before. We host a series of Zoom calls just for the members. We started a podcast. We started chapter highlights, several different things. So it was definitely a lot to juggle as a high schooler, but thankfully, my last year as a senior, I only had like my math class and my English class. And then the rest of the classes were just kind of like fun business classes. I was a peer teacher in a few of them. So it wasn't like I had a very hard schedule. So I made time even like during the school day when I was had downtime to work on some DECA things when I could. Um, so it wasn't terribly hard, but there was a lot of responsibility. We knew that we had to get things done, and a lot of times we would kind of split our roles up. So I had an assignment I needed to get done by this day, and that's kind of how we accomplished so much. And then this year is kind of similar. We don't meet near as often, but we do try to meet a couple of times a month just to discuss the things that we need to get done. And our officer coach this year is awesome. And so he calls us and we have a monthly call with him just to catch up and make sure we're all doing good personally, and then to talk about our goals for that month as well. So definitely just having like a schedule and knowing it's helped me so much to make lists of, hey, this is my DECA stuff I need to get done. This is my school stuff I need to get done. And just kind of making sure everything's in a row and then I get it done when I can, but done on time too.
Right, for sure. And the on time thing is something that you really have to keep up in your head and every single planner. And sometimes you still forget something, which is okay. I think from experience, there's been times where I've forgotten something and I had it written down everywhere. And yet I still forgot it. And so, and it takes a second for me to be like, it's okay. It was one thing. Probably just had a lot going on that week. But for sure, and I love that you had somebody checking in with you guys all the time, not only for DECA, but also in your personal lives, because that's so important. And I love this about DECA members that we are overachievers. We're people who really push, and I could say so many corny things like right now, like maximize your momentum. But those are things that we actually do. I mean, it's really
Right.
amazing where you see a kid who, especially I've seen this first-handedly, where I've seen a freshman did not like talking, absolutely did not want whatever it was, social anxiety, whether it was that or the fact that they just hadn't really been in a capacity they're able to learn and grow and foster that curiosity. And then they're like, well, okay, well, I don't think I could do DECA because, well, one, I'm not good at that, but also I don't want to go into business. I'm like, that doesn't matter. It literally does not matter. And then they're like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to try it. I'm going to see how it goes. And by the end of freshman year, it's like that spark has lit up where they're like, wow, okay, never mind about all the stuff I said before because I can do this and I am so ready and I'm going to make sure that I am the best person there. And that mentality is incredible to see actually form. And with that comes a lot of responsibility. The fact that you not only do have other people holding you accountable for certain things, absolutely. There's going to be a chapter advisor, a chapter officer, whether that be serving on an association or district officer team. You're going to have people of those staffs also looking to make sure that you're completing your work. But there's a certain standard that we hold for ourselves as well. We hold ourselves accountable for a lot and we forget about it, where I'm doing something, whatever that might be for. And I know that they expect something great, but I want to make sure that I give them something excellent. And it's a hard accountability thing. It's a hard responsibility to have for yourself that a lot of people don't realize. But I think it is so important that as really a DECA family that we make sure that we're checking in on each other and realizing that, hey, I am here for you. I'm going to help you. It doesn't matter if I need to FaceTime you because you're 3 states down, but if you're worried about something, let's talk about it. Let's figure out what we can do to help de-elevate that stress. Or even having some sort of officer director or somebody who's in charge of that to check in that not everything is necessarily about the work that you're completing for DECA, but let's talk about your personal life. How is that going? How is that contributing to maybe the stress that you're having in other parts of your life? And sometimes we act like therapists, but it really, really works. And at the end of the day, we're kids, we're young, and
Mhm.
we have the weight on of the world on our shoulders in most instances, and we do so well with it. And it's incredible. I never would have thought as a middle schooler, like looking at high schoolers, I never would have thought that. I mean, yes, was I scared and intimidated and also really excited to be a high schooler and see all these incredible things I could do? Sure. I never thought that I would see a high school student talk in front of 18,000 people. Ever. I never would have thought that. I didn't think that was possible. I didn't think that you could, freshman year, I didn't think that anyone had the ability to serve 2 terms as a state officer and then be a junior as an executive officer like Hadley. Like I didn't think those things were possible, but DECA kids make it possible. They make the impossible possible. It's just about really making sure that when you're making things that are impossible become possible, that you're also making sure that you're not sacrificing yourself for those things. Make sure that there's a balance. So I absolutely love everything, Shelby, that you talked on for that. And I could talk hours and hours about that stuff, but it is probably the most important thing to take away from this entire episode.
Yes, I agree. Just making sure you have that balance. Don't get so stressed out with meeting your deadlines. I told my girls, I was like, listen, yes, we have things that we need to accomplish, but right now, I mean, high school is your priority right now, like you, or college even. Like that, I mean, that's your future. You need to do that before you worry about our Instagram posts and things like that. Yes, those matter, but right now, school is your priority. So get that stuff done and make sure you're okay with that. Don't stress out about our stuff until you make sure that stuff's good.
And that just comes with time management, and sometimes something will get missed, and that's okay. But DECA is an organization that really is not only is it pushing kids to become college and career ready, but it also makes sure that they prioritize education. It's an educational club organization. It's something that everyone's supposed to learn and grow from. And so they take school very seriously because you need it. You take
Mhm.
CTE classes, you need those classes to learn things. And so it's important to have that balance between everything and also just a social life. Is DECA social? Absolutely. That's why I love the idea of a conference where I'm not only competing and I'm doing work, but I'm also talking to people. So there's always a balance in DECA. You just have to make sure that you're able to find it and have time to really manage all of that.
Yeah, I agree.
So while you were a competitor, what was the event that you competed in? I know a lot of people have changed, so we'll see what your response is. And what is kind of your largest tip for members that are entering competition or even specifically for your event?
Yeah, so my freshman year, I picked a partner to do a team event with me. And I picked one of my friends. I would go to DECA meetings after school and she would ride home with me. So I just kind of like made her sit at the meetings with me. And so she ended up deciding that she wanted to join too, but she did not have any business classes at the time. It just didn't work with her schedule. But she ended up being able to compete with me. So we competed, I believe it's hospitality and tourism my freshman year. So we did that at our district event and it was terrible. It was so bad. But I have learned so much from that experience. We sat and met with the judge and had a scenario, but I learned so much from that. It it was probably a mixture of things. I mean, I was a freshman. I never done it before. I didn't know what it looked like. She hadn't even had a business class, so she didn't even know what the terms meant. But from that, so I did that at district. So we didn't make it to state because it was so bad. But there was another girl in my chapter that did a sports and entertainment competition with a friend. Well, she qualified for the state conference, but her partner could not go. It was like during spring break and she had a trip or something.
Mhm.
So our Tennessee allowed somebody to come in with her to compete at state since her partner couldn't go. So my advisor had like looked at our test scores and stuff, and she picked me to go with her. So we competed at state my freshman year, and it was so much better. It was so good. We had an awesome judge. So we did that for sports and entertainment, and we placed eighth in the state. Well, they took five to ICDC. So we were like the alternative, but we still went to ICDC that year for a learning academy. So we still got to experience and see all
Right.
of it. So that was my freshman year. And then my sophomore year, I did a business operations written event. So
Mhm.
I knew I've never been a good test taker. And I think that's what bumped my score down my freshman year. I get so much test anxiety. I was
Mhm.
like, I don't want to do a test. I'd much rather write a paper.
Mhm.
So I did the research for the business operations project. So I took a local venue that we have here. It's a wedding venue. And I had to adjust it and decide how can I make it an event venue for anything, not just weddings. So I wrote a big long paper about it and made some boards to present with. And that skipped over our district conference. And so I did that at state my sophomore year.
Mhm.
And I qualified for ICDC, and then that's the year that it got canceled that we didn't go. It was supposed to go to California, and that's when COVID canceled it. But I was going to compete with it.
Right.
Um, So I think that was the year that ICDC didn't happen at all. It wasn't virtual
Right,
or
right.
anything.
It wasn't, that was just
Yeah.
canceled.
So that kind of stinked, but I did do it and I learned so much from doing that
Right,
paper too. So then my junior year, my school has a school-based enterprise project. So normally they pick some upperclassmen to present that project. And it also goes straight to nationals. So it skips over state. So I did the paper for that. So we wrote the paper to be certified, and then we were going to present at ICDC as well. So that was the year ICDC was virtual. So I we did the Zoom thing with my people and submitted it for ICDC, and we did not qualify at ICDC. But we went through all the steps with that. And then this past year, I also did the paper for that as well.
mhm,
So a variety of different things, but I did learn that the written paper was for me, and that's what I preferred better. But overall, just when competing in general, I've told so many people when I went on chapter visits and stuff, especially new DECA members that haven't competed before, like when we talk about competition, like it seems so scary. Like that's a
right,
big word. It seems scary. But I've told them, I was like, out of your, like, for at least for us, for our state conference, like your competition is like 15 minutes out of the time you're there.
right,
Like it is such a small portion of the time you're being there. And it's you in front of one person. You're not standing and competing in front of 50 people. It's you and a judge, or
mhm,
you and your friend and a judge. So it's not near as scary as it seems. I always just say, like, to stay confident, know that you're okay. Like, if you go in there acting like you know what you're doing, it
right.
is going to go much better than if you're sitting there nervous and saying and things like that. But if you go in and act like you got it, then you probably do, or at least they think
Very
you
good.
will. And then for written events, if that's something like you're interested, just staying prepared and like knowing at the beginning of the year, like when your deadline is, and kind of pacing yourself out so you're not rushing at the last minute to get that paper written. And if you do like a school based enterprise or something, just keeping all of that info, like all of your records for like the financial things or how much you've bought or whatever the circumstances may be, just having all of that down. So when it comes time to write your paper, it's easy to find all those things and records.
Right, for sure. And competition is a scary word. It means that somebody inevitably will be watching you do something that you spent a lot of time preparing for, something that you put in a lot of effort for. And you can psych yourself out of competition. We did that at ICDC this past year, where we were about to go into our finals competition, and we essentially had presented nothing against the person who watched it, but we presented for another kid because we just wanted to, do eye contact. It wasn't very formal. Our shoes were off. We were not, it was really just about kind of getting the jitters out and saying something to somebody. We skipped over some sections, we sped through a lot of them, but it was just a way for us to just throw it all out there before we went 110% in the actual round. And I think they might have took that presentation slightly more serious than we were intending it for it to be. And they had some valid critiques that we kind of got really scared about because some of them were stuff that he didn't understand from the paper, reflecting the presentation, and it made sense because we weren't explaining everything. But in that moment, it just felt, oh my gosh, what if we have to change absolutely everything in our presentation 3 hours before we present? So after achievement awards, we just stayed at the conference center just the entire time. So that was like 5 hours. Our presentation was like the last one at 4. But our advisor was like, you might as well just go there and practice. So we did. And we tried not to overexert our voices too much, but we definitely scared ourselves. And it's hard because when you're, especially at something that's that high stakes, when you're going into a finals round at ICDC, you're thinking that this is everything that I've worked up to. Like every single thing that I've done for competition is leading up to this one moment. Try not to think about it like that. It's a really bad way, a negative way to think about your competition round. Because if you're just thinking about this is my make or break it, like if I fail this, I am done. Now, was I also thinking those exact same things when I was going into it? Absolutely. Was it right? No, it was not healthy for me at all. But I remember like texting my advisor or group chatting him on GroupMe and texting some of my friends from my chapter. And they gave us like a little pep talk right before. We got messages from them hyping us up. They were all so sweet. And we needed that. We needed that little bit of encouragement before we walked into our competition. And then we did so well. And it was just because we had the little adrenaline boost of that, okay, wait, no, all of that's wrong. He was right. It was really bad because we were doing it bad on purpose. We just forgot about that when he started telling us stuff. And we were just like, okay, we can do this. It doesn't matter. Something has been working because it worked at prelims. It worked in the past. We don't need to change anything at this point. Whatever's happened. Honestly, it's a very bad idea to try to change stuff that on the spot because you practiced with something else. And we went in there and I walked out of that feeling so good. I will say though, part of me was thinking, well, was this as good as my prelim round? And it's hard because if your prelim round is really good, you don't need to make it that much better for finals because it's still good. It's still
Right.
above anyone's expectation. You're just thinking that, well, if this is a higher level of competition, it needs to be even better. Maybe you started out with an amazing presentation already and it doesn't need to be better.
You
And
just need to do.
right, you just need to be in that mindset where you're like, I can do this. And once you say that to yourself a bazillion times, and you walk in there and you hold your eye contact with that one person sitting there, one person, not 50, and you have your best friends by your side, or even if you're alone, that you're confident in yourself, then you're going to have a good presentation. Whether that means you place in the top 10 or you qualify for the next one, it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, as long as you're happy with your performance, that's all that mattered. And when we walked out of that round, I could confidently say I was happy with how we did. And whatever was going to happen, it was going to happen because I felt like we did everything we possibly could.
Right. It just goes back to what we were saying earlier. What I mean, if you know your stuff, if you know your presentation, you got it. You just have to talk about it now. And I think that was kind of hard for me when I presented my written event. I was like, I've worked so hard on this. I've written this paper. I know it inside and out. I just need to speak it now. It's just time for me to let everything out that I've learned. Um, so I completely agree. Just going in and staying confident, but not stressing out too bad where you jinx yourself. And then just afterwards, knowing my advisor was always like, no, you don't stress. You did the
Right.
best that you could. And if you are happy with yourself, that's the best you can do. You've done what you can do. Now it's just time to wait and see. And that's something that I'll always remember.
100%. So we are running low on time here, but it's my favorite question to ask because I get the best responses. What is like your funniest moment in tech? And not fun, but like made you on the ground, bawling, laughing, everything.
Yes. So last year when we went to ELS in DC, we had went, I think that day there was some conference stuff, and then like we had a lot of downtime. So my team and our advisor at the time, he's no longer the advisor, but we decided that we were going to go out to eat. So he had rented like this big suburban thing that we all could fit in. So we all drove to this place to eat. Well, that night, the southern region was getting a party bus.
Oh, okay.
So we had to get back to the hotel to meet the other states. So we had ate, and I don't know, like if we spent too much time, I don't know what was happening, but we had to rush to get back to the hotel. So wherever we had eaten, we had parked in like this huge parking garage. So we were already like booking it to get to the car. So we get in the car, and he was not the best driver, and he could not figure out how to get outside of the garage. He couldn't figure out how to get out of the garage. Like the signs weren't labeled right. It was a big ordeal. So after we get out, he is driving through the streets of Washington insanely, trying to get us back to the hotel. It was so scary, but it was hilarious because all we could do was laugh. So we get back to the hotel. Well, whoever was in charge of the Southern Region Party bus was calling him and being like, hey, you are the last ones. We're waiting on you. And so we pull into the hotel, and he like whips it in front of the hotel, and the valet's gonna like park the car and stuff. And we had to run across the street to get to the big bus. And everybody, of course, was watching us and taking pictures of us. And it was so funny. But
Mhm.
I mean, all you could do was laugh. It was hilarious. And then, of course, everybody in the bus was laughing at us because we were running across the street. And then we got in the bus, and just a thing that Tennessee DECA has always done, anytime we go anywhere on any of our trips, we always wear a uniform. Always.
Mhm.
Even if it's khaki shorts and tennis shoes, we always match from head to toe.
Right.
We joked last year that like we hadn't seen each other in real clothes before because anytime we were together, we're wearing our polos and stuff. So we get onto this party bus, and every other state is in like their cute casual clothes and
Oh, and you
dresses
guys.
and we're sitting there in polos and khakis after we had just ran across the street, and it was so funny. But it ended up being so much fun, and that night we went and saw a bunch of the monuments in DC. But that's something that I will always remember, is running across the street in Washington after being late.
Well, that's very funny because there's so many things that everyone can relate to, rushing, booking it across to try to get to someplace in time, especially in DECA. But Power Trip is in DC this year as well, and
Yeah.
I'm definitely assuming that Tennessee will be there.
Yes, we will.
We will be there as well. So that's super exciting. Hopefully, we don't get into another ordeal where anyone has to rush in. Well, I'm sure you guys will be in your khakis and matching polos again. But
Right.
hopefully nobody's rushing anywhere. But that's very, very funny and great moment. So last thing is, what is just your overall piece of deck advice? It can be a one-liner, it can be an explanation, but whatever you would consider your biggest kind of parting words for anyone watching this episode.
Yeah, just the short answer is to be confident and have fun. I mean, overall, that's what this organization is for. It's supposed to prepare you for your next steps, whether that be college or the workforce or whatever. But you are going to remember your time as having fun and working hard and going into competition and even events. Like, just stay confident and know that you're here to do this. You made it this far. If you're a association officer or a district officer or whatever that may be, you're here for a reason, and you made it this far. So just stay confident in yourself and try not to compare yourself to others. It's hard, especially with this organization, because I mean, like you said earlier, we are all so hardworking, and it's hard. I mean, it's hard to look at everybody else. So just stay confident in yourself and know that you're here for a reason and have fun. Because in the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Absolutely. So thank you. That's an amazing way to end the episode. But thank you guys so much for watching episode 8 of Spotlights with Sarah, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a great day.